here. Hey everybody, welcome. It is our weekly workshop, and today we have Kyle and Austin, who are creators of a game called Greek Tragedy. And we saw them in some of our. Brian, Charles, please go ahead and mute yourself. We saw them. Let me go ahead and take care of that. We saw them on our Discord channels, and we saw the game. We said, "Oh, we want to test this out. Take a look at this. This looks really interesting." And so I reached out to them, see if they can come to talk to us a little bit about their processes of how they released this game onto Steam, how it's going, and we just wanted to bring them in to hear about not only the process of getting the game released, but learn more about Greek tragedy. So, Kyle, Austin, thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you for having us.
All right, so who would like to go first? Kyle, can you give us have you start and kind of fill us in on how this all began?
Absolutely. I wanted to just take a quick note. I joined the member of the IGDA community, and that's actually how I met Austin. He's also a member, and he was actually running our IGDA community. I spent a good year or so going to their meetings. COVID made it really helpful that he was doing the meetings remotely, so it made it really convenient just to hop in, talk to other developers. I was a school teacher for a couple years, and I moved back to Michigan to found my company, Prairie Evil Games. The cost of living was just a little less here than where I was in DC, so I was able to kind of take that risk without, going into massive amounts of debt. And so I jumped in. I found this community that was building and creating stuff that I was into. And one afternoon, Austin was like, "Hey, I want to make something with somebody, who's interested." And I kind of threw my name in the hat. And some weeks went by, and then we started tossing around some ideas. And that's when Austin kind of handed me, he's an awesome engineer, so he handed me a really cool capsule. Everything was basic, primitive polygons and capsules, and was just like, "Hey, what can you do with that?" So I created a little mini environment, and I handed it back over to him, like, "What you think?" He's like, "Hey, this is a good direction." So then we paused development there for a moment to just do a game design document and just say, what should we make? We went through a couple of different ideas, everything from zombies to a couple of other things, and we ended up not a zombie, but yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Right. No, go ahead, Kyle.
Oh, okay. So then we pivoted to kind of more of a scarier Hitchcock sort of like don't really show the enemy right away sort of approach, and we got rid of the whole shooting stuff and kind of pivoted to a little more strategic, puzzle base, and I think that was what the community wants too. So that's where we pivoted.
Yeah. So Kyle and I are both teachers, right? And there's this common idiom that says you should write what you know. And so we wanted to see if we could create a horror game themed around universities and in particular fraternities, which can be really, really cool organizations, but can sometimes be some of the scarier parts of a university community. And the things that go down. Certainly, there's been a lot of press in recent years on hazing and other things that you don't want to see on a college campus. And so we decided to ask ourselves if we could create a horror game centered around that. And so we started building out a college campus. We eventually discovered that the open nature of many college campuses doesn't really work very well for a Resident Evil style of game. Resident Evil is a game in which your characters have low mobility, but your enemies also have low mobility. They are limited in their means to attack you. They shamble, they walk slowly, right? If you've ever watched the kind of Halloween films, the horror films, serial killers, most of the time they will be walking slowly toward you to build dramatic tension. They won't be quickly sprinting at you. They'll be trying to fill you with dread more than shock terror. And so that's why Resident Evil works the way it does. The only reason that enemies work well in Resident Evil is because, the classic ones, is because the environments are very confined and constrained and cluttered, and navigating them is very difficult. They're dark environments, the camera angles you're provided. Dunkey had a wonderful phrase. In Resident Evil, the cameraman works for the zombies, right? Trying to help the zombies, help the slow, weak enemies get you via surprise and all of that. And so we discovered that an open college campus is not compatible with that kind of gameplay. Silent Hill, the original Silent Hill 2, did manage to succeed there partially, right? They had different enemy types that could fly and harass you, but those moments when you're outside are never really the scariest for most players. It's more of the atmosphere. Another thing we knew is that we needed to go for that low poly art style, and we needed to make heavy use of filters because, right, Kyle is a good artist, but we only have one of him. And if we need to make an entire college campus beautiful, that's just going to be logistically impossible because we're both very busy. We have other jobs and we're self-funding this entire thing. And so we decided to bring most of the action indoors and kind of go back to that Resident Evil style gameplay. Because this is on a college campus, we do not want much in the way of guns. Guns are very scary in themselves, but we didn't want to focus on that as a source of fear. We wanted to focus on some of the social dynamics, fraternity members gone crazy, stuff like that. And so Amy's only weapon that she collects about 1/3 of the way through the game is a taser. So you can stun your enemies and run past them, but you can never really defeat them and put them out of the game. And that also kind of works very well for generating fear as well, right? Because you need to stun them quickly, move on, lose their line of sight. You can never make the situation completely safe. Anyway, this is a long tangent. I don't even remember the original question, but
how do we get started?
Yeah,
I think that's right. Yeah.
Should I begin doing my speed run?
Whatever
okay.
you feel comfortable with.
I would like to relay a quick story because you're going to see something. If you haven't played this game before, you can find it on itch. You can find the demo on Steam. But you're going to find some things that might be a little bit strange to you. Let's go ahead and start the game. This game begins in a cave. You are a kind of anthropomorphic sheep character. As it turns out, the main character, Amy, is a furry artist. And if that seems like a weird occupation to choose, well, it's because one day I have phenomenal 2D artists, and they do a lot of great work for us. Well, one day I went onto their stream and I noticed that they were making some very unexpected art, art that you would probably not want to show off in a professional setting. And it was something I didn't expect, but they had a massive audience, and this artist of mine was making a massive amount of money. It struck me as a very interesting and weird job that most people probably do not talk about, but some people make a lot of good living from. And so that is why Amy is a furry artist. That's why you begin the game as one of her characters. This is a story that she is writing right now, okay? Okay, let's go ahead and keep going. This cave is full of puzzles. I'm just breezing through them to get to the actual university part. The game has fixed camera angles. Oh yeah. I did just use a cheat code there, didn't I? Yeah. Without even. Actually, no, I didn't. I solved the puzzle in the optimal way. No cheat codes yet. So you can see this game is a fixed camera angle game. That means tank controls, and a lot of people are very. It's a very old way of controlling a character, and a lot of people will not be used to it, may find it frustrating. Everyone will find it clumsy, even if they have a lot of experience. And that is actually what we want. We want to empower enemies. Look, that person's trying to drag me underneath the water, so I'm going to go ahead and run away from them, solve the puzzle, we're all good. These controls are very weird. It's like driving a tank. When I press the up arrow key right now, Sheeply will walk forward, okay? Not up relative to the camera, but up relative to the character, okay? This can be very, very awkward. It's weird and clumsy, and that's exactly what we want for a creepy game in which you have some chase sequences we want you fumbling through and getting afraid of, right? Being fearful of. Let's see here. I think the lighting on some of those pillars is a little bit strange. Let me see. So most of the puzzles in our game have a progression to them. So at the beginning of this cave area, you have this push puzzle. It's a pretty standard puzzle mechanic that you'll find in a lot of other games, actually. But over time, we try and make it more and more complicated. So you do the first push puzzle, and it's all calm, it's relaxed. You then need to do one while navigating these dangerous waters over there, right? At the end of the cave, you need to prove that you have this mechanic down pat and you can do it, but also do it fast before this character catches up to you and kills you. If you're killed during this chase, it's okay. You will not have to replay it. The game will simply move on. If you get to the end, however, you'll probably get an achievement in the final game. All right.
Now,
There was a question.
it's probably playing
Go for it.
smoothly on Austin's end, but it's a little laggy on our end.
Is it a little bit choppy?
Just a little,
Yeah, just
choppy,
a little
But I know
choppy.
it's smooth.
Okay. Cool. You want to answer that question, Kyle?
I didn't see it. My fault. What was chat? Is that where it's
Yes, yes. Will you share the inspiration for the title of this game? Is what the question was.
Yeah, absolutely. We workshopped the title a little bit. I know that dealing with fraternities, is a very Greek, life for folks. I don't know if anybody here was in a fraternity. I tried to rush one when I was at campus, and I just didn't have enough time to get my studies done and what they were requesting. So I ended up dropping out of the rush. But it was a really awesome group, and there was nothing wrong with that group. It was just, I didn't have enough time to fulfill their needs. And so it kind of plays into the fact that our main antagonist is a large fraternity called the Delta Psi, which we're going to see here in a second, which our Kurt is a part of. And then also we kind of tried to make this like a Greek tragedy. It almost spans 3 days. I feel like by the end of the third level, it'll be our third day, but it is all happening in one, the day and the night. And then we're kind of figuring out how that third day is coming into play. And then also it's playing like a Greek tragedy in the way that there is actually a couple of songs that kind of happen. And so it is kind of following along with some of those, loosely following along with some of those traditions.
Yeah, there's also the main monster for the film, game is a gigantic statue of Poseidon, who you see on the title screen, who will be stalking you throughout certain portions of the game. The main plot of the game sets off here, right? Amy is a furry artist. She gets interrupted via an email from her boyfriend. It is several weeks before the actual semester starts. She's in her dorm early, and the email comes through and is somewhat threatening, telling her to go to the student union building across campus and don't tell anyone where you're going, okay? The email is cut off. She finds herself in her dorm room. We can see our destination. The end of the game will be over there, if we can only get there. And so you'll have a visual confirmation of that building a few times throughout the game. Once you get onto the roof, once you get to the other places, once you get down to campus, you will struggle to get in. And so our first priority is to simply get out, okay? We can use photos, memories, good memories in this game are our save points, right? We can learn more about the characters and their relationships, and because of the good memory they provide, we can use them to save permanent progress in case the worst happens. When you explore the little dorm area, you'll find that Amy actually cannot get out. There is a digital lock on these doors, but it is malfunctioning, and we've been locked in. The fire marshal would not be very pleased. So clearly something is going wrong here, okay? Anyway, you explore the area. You can get a note from your residential advisor, right? The upperclassmen usually who are trying to take care of students in their dorm. Sandy is actually from another game of mine. If she is your residential advisor, giving you hints on what you need to do if the lock is not working, okay? How to get equipment and all of that. We can find food in the game, right? That can help heal you. You can use the microwave to cook that food, to warm it up, to change it. People have expressed to me that toasting an apple is not something that you can actually do in real life. So maybe we will replace that with something else soon. But people seem to enjoy messing around with that. If you put something incorrect or put something metal into the microwave, you'll get a surprise. So you can walk around, you can get inventory upgrades. Right now we only have 2 slots. We have documents we can collect and review. Amy has a certain amount of health. And you can get upgrades for pretty much all of those things. Right? You often
There's the Delta Psi banner right there.
Right here. So
Very nice.
In this game, there are a lot of different kinds of puzzles, but probably the most kind of classic and easygoing kind of puzzle in this genre is the find an item to use on the item puzzle, right? It's essentially like you have a locked door and you need to find a key to unlock the door. Well, it doesn't have to be a door. It could be a washing machine, right? And maybe it doesn't have to be a key. Maybe in this case, the key is 50 cents, 2 quarters that you need to find in the environment to open it up. So you can decorate that basic setup, the key and locked door puzzle, in many different thematic ways to get a lot of mileage out of it. These are very easy and accessible puzzles. The hardest part for the player is just thinking about, what can I interact with? What do I have that might work on this? And then trying different combinations that might make sense, right? So you interact with this paper wash washing machine. It says there's some unwashed jeans in there and a small red object. 50 cents is required to open. Do you have 50 cents? No, you do not. So you cannot open it yet. You'll have to keep exploring.
So I guess now would be an okay time to kind of talk about yarn a little bit. Is that okay to bring that up as we go?
And it's something I could actually show. In this game, when you interact with various objects, you will get a lot of information, right? Typically in the form of this message at the bottom of the screen, but sometimes you will have the ability to actually make some choices. For instance, if we go back to Amy's computer, you get a little bit of that, and then we get all of these options that come up, and you can read fan mail for her graphic novel furry stuff. You can check your student loans, request help, which will take you to the Discord for our company, where we can give you hints if you're stuck. And so all of this is programmed via Twine. And I'm going to need to share a different screen if you want to see this. Let me just share the overall screen instead of the application. So stop share, here comes Twine, and then I'll share my screen again. Okay, very good. So the dialogue in this game, dialogue is a pretty organic thing if you think about it, right? In a game, you need to link different dialogue passages together. You need to have dialogue that can kind of go to different pieces of dialogue based on the choices users make. And so expressing a dialogue is much more naturally done in a graph, like what you see here, versus like a text file that is linear and just going down the page. And so this is Twine. It's an application that allows you to create passages, create choices that the user will be able to choose from. Those choices link to additional passages. You can also check variables, right? So in this case, we're checking if you have called Sandy on your phone before. And if you haven't, you'll get a message from Sandy. She then gets taken out halfway through that message. And if you call her again, you will just get beeps that just ceaselessly go on, right? So you can have variables. You can have control flow as if you're programming. You can do a lot of different stuff. And you can also create your own commands to issue from Twine by programming in C# within Unity. And that's extremely powerful. This is the technology that was made for Night in the Woods, which was actually published not too far from us here. Finji did it in Grand Rapids, not far from Ann Arbor and Kalamazoo. Anyway, it's a very, very expressive way to deal with dialogue, though you will need to program a little bit if you want to get it kind of hooked up and working with all the features that we currently have. It's very good for things like cutscenes, right? Because cutscenes, you often want to run some text and then run some commands, like show a background image or play this video, right? And you can do that over time. You can put in delays, you can deal with timing pretty well. So it's actually surprisingly powerful for simple cutscenes as well as dialogue.
I know this diagram is like massive and looks super complicated. You start small. You start with simple linear, and then you branch out. You build complexity. You don't just start out with all of this. You have that simple, get that minimum viable product going, and then start, making different twists and stuff. And that's when you really get this organic spread.
Yeah, usually what happens is like we build a puzzle in the game, and we literally make the build, put it in front of one of our friends and watch them play on Discord. And we're like, oh shit, like the puzzle is totally blocking them, right? Like they missed the hint. Okay, they're not looking where they're supposed to look. They're thinking about things that aren't helpful to the puzzle. So what we'll then go in and do is we'll make changes and we'll experiment with different ways to phrase certain things. In the dialogue, in the hints, we might add some information or take some away. A really good example, if you see this right here, is that one of the puzzles here is that you eventually need to figure out what the room number of this room is, right? You know that your room, Amy's room, is 515. You know that there's another room over here in the dorm commons area called 514. So 514, 515, can you guess what this room number is? And a lot of players were struggling with that, right? They were struggling with that and what order to read it in. Like most players would say 514, 515, so this much must be 513. And that's not quite right because the numbering scheme follows the wall. 514 around the wall to 515, and then 516 is the correct number. And so when you look at these other numbers, right, it will, Amy will point out some things to you. The 3 rooms in this commons, they follow the wall with ascending room numbers. So the game is trying to get you thinking a certain way. If you look at this particular poster, it'll say this poster was hastily applied. Is it obscuring something in red text? We've discovered that in games like this, if you ever color text red, people will just latch onto that as something critical to progression. And so you'll sometimes get players who are literally skipping all the text until they see something that's red. But this red text did a pretty good job of getting players to think that, wait a second, the fact that this poster is obscuring the final number is actually something we need to be thinking about right now. We also include an explanation of why the player cannot remove it, why Amy can't just rip the poster off, because it would damage and destroy the number. It's a pretty weak excuse, to be honest with you. But I think many players are willing to accept it for the most part, because many players will start to ask questions like, why can't Amy just rip it off? Come on, right? And their immersion will be shattered if those questions aren't answered, at least in some way.
So Alexander asks, is this the type of game that maybe generates more than one ending based on the player's choices?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So there are a bunch of different endings in this game. And actually, I think I just saved, so I'll go ahead and quit and I'll show you. If you go back to the title screen, you'll see that we have one ending that's unlocked, and now we have a second ending that's unlocked, and they actually start to pile up on your title screen, right? So you have X here, you have E here, and I'm guessing that based on just these letters, you can kind of guess vaguely how many endings there probably are. There aren't as many to fill the gaps between E and X, but there is like an ending F, there's a C, there's a B, there's an A, and there's an S ending as well. Depending on what you do, how far you get. There are certain puzzles in the game that are really obvious, and you'll solve them and you'll move forward with the story. But usually there's at least one puzzle that you really have to be paying attention to notice. And if you want to get the A ending and get the special items that enable that ending, you need to kind of be solving kind of parallel puzzles and some puzzles that aren't immediately obvious. So we're hoping one of the really cool things about this genre, one of the really great things about this genre is that if you put in some clever puzzles that are a little bit tricky, but not too tricky, you can get a player to spend 30 minutes in a small area. And for a team that is really resource strapped like we are, right? We don't want to produce a bunch of art. Like we don't have the time for that. We don't have enough personnel. Kyle does a great job, but we only have one of him. For a team like that, we really need to get as much bang out of our buck as we can. Like if we make one tiny area and fill that with details, we need the player to spend a lot of time there. And they will, and they'll happily do it if we put in good, engaging puzzles that they are satisfying to solve and that keep them in that area for a little while. So anyway, when I load back in here, let's see, there we go. When I load back in, right, you'll be running to solve this dorm puzzle and escape the dorm. You'll be running back and forth, investigating a lot of objects, reading a good bit of text to eventually get behind this locked door in Amy's room that she's never been able to open. Get into her office that is, her closet, which is currently jammed, right? You'll just be running around unlocking all sorts of stuff. And that eats up a ton of time and it's pretty satisfying for a lot of players. Get the battery, there's a safe, a mini game. One cool thing about this mini game right here, it's very simple. The cursor goes around in a circle and you click on it when it's in that bar. Every time you die in this game, you will have to do that mini game. And every time you die, in order to like respawn at the latest checkpoint, every time you die, there will be a new dial that you'll have to hit. and all of the rotations will go much, much, much faster. So you can continue and try again as often as you actually want, an infinite amount of times. There's no life system. However, every time you fail, you will have to be much better in that minigame to keep playing. Otherwise,
just
we
to
can
jump in
back to
about
the last photo. Yep.
Just to jump in about respawning in the save. We initially didn't have, we had respawning, but we didn't have the save until the scope of our game got large enough to where it's like, wow, this is going to take somebody a couple hours to finish the game. And I'm a new dad, so I don't have a couple of hours to play video games. I get, a half hour here and there to like, before dinner, I'll squeeze in some game time after work. So it's been really helpful to be able to have a save, because then you could play for each save point is kind of, staggered within, where after a couple minutes of playtime, you'll be able to save and, reinforce it. Now, we have another feature where saves only happen once at each card. So it kind of makes you have to use them sparingly.
Yeah, so we in general, we're okay if the player loses a little bit of time, because when they replay that content, they'll probably know the puzzle solutions and it'll be less painful than the first time they went through. But in general, we don't want players losing more than about 10 minutes of progress, because that is a real drag. But at the same time, we want to produce a lot of tension, right? As in, if they get killed, then they really, it really is a terrible, terrible fate. And so we try and spread those out at a certain cadence so that you don't lose too much progress, but you do have something at stake. A quick thing I want to point out before the next question. Jordan H. Lowney, one of my friends who works at Volition, told me that you really want to focus on escalation and pacing in a game like this. So you'll notice early on in the dorm, all the lights were on, right? You'd received a pretty intimidating email, but that was pretty much it. Now, you've gone back to your room, the photo we looked at is torn, right? Our save point is destroyed. We notice that there are certain parts of the environment that have been disrupted. Something's been knocked over. We're hearing glass shatter in the other side of the room. There's this really weird indent in the wall, which seems like it might be, I don't know, changing when you look at it, right? So the situation is kind of degrading, and we need to start being careful. I don't think you can hear anything right now because I'm sharing my entire screen. But
we can hear.
Oh, you can hear. Oh, great. You can hear the game?
I thought so.
Yeah, we could hear it.
Yeah, so you'll begin to hear footsteps. If you pay attention. Anyway, we have a bunch of items now. We got to get out of here fast. So I'm going to use the water on the sink to wash out a second quarter. That quarter gives me 50 cents, which allows me to open up the washing machine. The washing machine gives me a second battery, which allows me to turn on the TV. Right? It's this chain of puzzles that all lead into each other. The TV allows me to learn a little bit of the lore of the world and find out what the community theme is for this semester, which I need to open up the second save. Technological, okay? We get a look at the president, another important character in the game, very briefly. And we can open up this save. Technological.
Easy.
We open it up, we get a screwdriver. That screwdriver can be used in Amy's closet in order to open up the vent and squeeze into this back room. And now we are in a place behind our bedroom that seems to have some pretty creepy things in it.
Oh, Jesus.
Got a little bit of blood on the ground, right? We can see that hole, that little panel, was actually a kind of a peeping wall right here. And that's really, really creepy. We have a door that we cannot open. Come back later. We now have a key we can use to get into this room. Right, so everything's linking together, okay? All right. Morse code. Some sort of fancy gem. We've got some sort of statue that seems to be blinking. Looks like a camera. Right. So you're discovering that this seemed like a relatively normal dorm room, but there is a lot of stuff going on here behind the scenes. And I think that's what compels a lot of the players who play through this. It's not so fun when you discover it because I'm showing it to you or telling you about it, but doing this alone and reading all the stuff and getting into the mood and letting your imagination run wild, all the stuff works a lot better.
And we have a randomization that when you go to play through this in your version of the demo, there is a chance you might have the same stuff, but it's a pretty low chance. It'll be a completely different answers to these puzzles.
Yep. Yeah. Anyway, do we have any other questions? I think the chat has a number on it.
Yeah, no, what is the total gameplay experience that time-wise that someone should expect for the first time through?
First time through, when the puzzles are pretty tricky for you, we've noticed most players take 5 to 6 hours to get at least the B ending. The C ending, you'll probably get that at like hour 3 or 4. The C ending is really funny. It's where you just find the first car you can and just leave, like without solving any of the problems in the universe or saving your boyfriend. It's like in that ending, I'll spoil a little bit. And that ending does not go very well for you because the cult is still active and they find you. Um,
Um, Charles asked, "Do the puzzles change in each playthrough, or the answers change?"
the answers change, and the location of certain items change. It reminds me a little bit of Resident Evil 3 and how it did some of its minor kind of changes for each playthrough based on chance. The puzzles themselves, though, their structures do not change significantly, as that would be a pretty crazy amount of effort. You'd have to make like 3 games
Right.
at once. And that's
It's not a bad idea. It's just if we had a larger team
Yeah.
and more
Yeah.
people and funding, we would be able to go down those roads. But
Right.
it really is about MVP for us, the minimum viable product at each stop gate, because that allowed us to get it in the hands of players, which I had some ideas that I thought would be wicked fun. Like, for instance, a maze. I used to love mazes as a kid, so I was like, I'll build a maze.
Thanks for the help.
No one likes to be
Muppet.
lost in a maze. And so I found that it was a good puzzle, but the fun was like really low. So we've narrowed the maze down, and it's no longer really a maze, and it's more of like a pathway that you run into incidences. So
Gotcha.
it's really important to get that MVP,
Yep.
so that way you can pivot towards the good
Yeah.
product rather than just what you think's good.
So I want to talk very briefly about some gameplay mechanics that are coming up. So in any horror game you play, like on itch.io or on Steam or whatever on console, especially on itch, like there's always a question that should be in the back of your mind as a player. Is this game's threats real? Right? Can I actually die, or am I on a universal thrill ride, right, that's trying to convince me of danger, but no matter what I do, I'll be fine. There are a lot of games out there, and I love them. They're really good and effective. They aim at creating a good atmosphere, and they aim at creating a great story. But you're never, as a player, in a real amount of threat. And up until this point in the game, you might think that's not the case either, right? As soon as I go out this door, we're going to be chased by our first enemy, and I'll let them hit me once or twice so I can tell you about another cool mechanic in the game. And then I'll tell you about the level design and how it works here and how it's really important for this kind of game. So we step out, right? The cultist appears at the end of the hall, right? The hall is designed to be long enough to give you some time to notice what's going on and walk away. The enemies can chase you through doors, making them scarier. When they hit you, you'll take damage. But another thing is that your hairstyle will actually change. Oh crap, oh this is really bad. Oh, I'm gonna die. Okay, enemy AI failed. So I'm gonna run back here. In many games, it's really important to help the player understand like where you are, right? How is your character doing? Where are they at in the game? Did you just damage the enemy, or did you take damage? Anyway, in a game like Resident Evil, if you take enough damage, your character's pose. Oh crap, I'm dead. You're in most games when you're low on health, your character will look like they're tired, right, or hurt. We didn't really want to do that, right? We don't want to show too much like physical damage because we're trying to make games that are cute but also scary. We also wanted to show your health change without you having to go into the menu and look at your health. So the hair actually will indicate what health you're at. And when you're super low, Amy will start to run and move around with that hurt pose as well. And again, it's all about communicating the state of the game to the player in interesting ways. Here's what I talked about earlier. When you get killed, you'll go to the continue screen. Depending on how you killed, you get a different one. And every time you arrive here, you must solve a minigame to continue. And look at that, right? Instead of 2 to hit, it's now 3.
It's not over.
If I died again, it would be 4 dials I have to hit, and it'd go like twice as fast. And if I hit again, it'll be 5 dials, and it'll go really fast. So it's kind of an interesting way to do a continue system. Now, this should despawn all the enemies. I think it should. Let me see here, right? Okay, and then we're going on. One final thing I want to point out to you is that loops in horror games are really, 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 really important. If you ever see a loop, that's a big deal. So when that enemy is chasing us, that enemy can hit in a very wide radius. If we get too close to that enemy, we're going to get hit. If we design our levels so that they are linear, they are kind of thin, straight pathways, the player is in big trouble. Like, they have nowhere to go. They will eventually run out of room and will take damage. It will be unfair, right? And so we always design at least one loop, and usually it's a figure 8. It will be like one loop on one end of a long linear stretch and then another loop. And we do that so that if you understand the level geometry and the map, if you've built a mental model of where you're at and where you can go, you can always escape. So you can, for instance, get the enemy to follow you in this loop and then run around them and then get back into the hallway, run around the loop there until they despawn, okay? That is how we keep the level design fair, and always give the player a chance of getting out of this without taking damage, which is really important because we have a ranking system as well. Anyway, a quick note on what we solved in this puzzle. You need to call someone to get them to automatically unlock this door for you because the lock isn't working. Now that someone is in on the cult, so they're looking for you. You cannot give your name. Though for security reasons, they'll ask for your name and your room number. You cannot give yours, because otherwise they will call in all the cultists, because now they know
So
where
you can give yours, but it's going to have consequences.
Yeah, but you're going to get killed. So you have to figure out the full name of another one of your dorm mates who have not moved in yet, and you have to find out what their room number is. And so by going through all of this, you eventually connect the dots, can report a name and room number that's accurate, and then you can get out of the door, which we do here, okay? Some weird fog seems to be hanging in the air. Not sure what that's about, but maybe it'll be important. All the other doors are locked. Eventually, you'll be able to get into those. We got a really cool Dutch angle as we run back toward the camera here, Crash Bandicoot style. We get some interesting stuff here. You're now in the second area. Your next goal is to get down this elevator. This elevator always closes when you get near it. It is very cruel like that. Someone's clearly watching. And so you explore this new area, you solve another puzzle, you go to the roof, and you get to kind of assess the situation, right? You get your first taser, you get a car to an escape vehicle. If you can just find a vehicle, then you can escape, right? You get to look around a little bit, you get a feel for the campus a little bit better. You can look through this telescope to kind of look at your escape car, and another note that's way further in the game for you. Eventually, you'll be at the student union. We really want to give the players, keep reminding them of their objective, which is why we keep finding ways to show off the student union where they're trying to go. This telescope is a huge part of that, right? Show you that there is more content. In fact, there's a save point right near that statue right there, right? So this helps the pacing. Right here is a safe. This safe will only open if you reach it within 3 minutes and 45 seconds. What's in the safe? I'm not sure. But if you happen to be a speedrunner, you get to find out, okay? Up here, there's another photo. It's another good memory from Amy and her boyfriend a few months earlier. So you get to kind of learn a little bit more about their relationship. Maybe you'll actually want to save him at the end, or maybe not. It depends on what you learn. Up here, there is a cultist who happens to have been stabbed. You'll learn about why this cultist was stabbed and why this person is a great friend of yours. And why this person got roped in to joining the cult, joining the frat, if you play the full game. For now, though, we can grab our taser. I'll show you how it's used really quickly. I don't think I need the pouch, do I? No, I'm good. Okay, so now we've got the taser refilled. We can shoot. We can charge. We can shoot this to unlock the door and let us get out, but we're not going to bother with that. I'm going to go finish the demo right here by talking to him. The man appears to be in pain. Amy, listen carefully. You're playing a demo, right? We kind of contextualize this demo as it being a premonition, a dream of Amy, right? So anyway, you play through, and then we'll get a ranking screen that gives us a ranking. It'll tell us what ending we found, ending X, and it'll tell us whether we had minus, neutral, or plus ranking. So we wake up, blah, 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 blah. Amy wakes up, time to go to university. Okay, see you in the full game, right? Bye-bye.
Right.
All right.
Game over.
Okay, so now you can see we've got ending X. we've got the time here, 1335. It's red, so it is not good enough. We took a bunch of damage, over 100 damage. We used our weapon 4 times, save usage. All of these things are not good enough, like not even close. So we get X minus instead of getting the X ranking or the X plus ranking if we did a really good job. These rankings, the minus, neutral, or plus, will appear on the title screen. But if I actually got a better ranking though, so if we got like X plus, we would see an X plus here.
It won't overwrite your better ranking if you get a lower one. So it's okay if your kid brother or kid sister plays and they don't do a good job. They're not going to ruin yours.
Yeah. So anyway, that's an entire walkthrough of the demo and a discussion of some of the different game design techniques we've been using in it.
There's a picture of our protagonist there.
Antagonist. Yep. Yeah, and a bunch of the cultists who are around it, the fraternity members.
There's so much to unpack. So one of the things that I love just talking to you guys is the amount of detail you looked into the actual game theory inside of this. The figure 8, the pacing, the making the player stay in one area to solve puzzles and versus just making like a throwaway environment where it's just, it's a hallway to this, to that, to this. Yep. So there's a lot of things that you guys looked at. Looking at some of the other trends that you see in video games, what are some of the other game theory logic that people who are getting into this tend to just gloss over and just skip completely?
I'll talk really quickly about something I noticed in a recent release, Ghost of Tsushima. AAA has a lot of standardization going on right now, and part of it's because like AAA is just such an expensive place to be, right? If you make a AAA game, you're spending many millions of dollars. And so you need to make sure you have a hit. As a result, you're going to see the same thing you see in Hollywood, right? So you're going to see a lot of standardization, a lot of the same common structures and tropes. One of those big ones is like guidance. How do you guide the player to their next objective? How do you make them understand where they need to go right now, what they should be doing, and prevent them from getting lost? Usually, like in a game like Skyrim, that will be like a map, right? Or a radar. Or you'll see like at the top of the screen, there will be like a compass and a little red dot that you're supposed to go toward. And what happens in that situation is you get a lot of players who are spending most of their time not analyzing and studying and focusing on the environment, the gorgeous, beautifully rendered environments full of detail. No, like they spend most of the game looking at the compass at the top of their screen or the radar in the corner of their screen. And it's very unsatisfying, right? And so lately what I've been seeing is AAA games have been starting to get a little bit more courageous with how they guide the player. In a game like Ghost of Tsushima, they still need a way to help you understand roughly where you want to go. So what they do is because, it's of your character and the theme of the game, the setting of the game, if you swipe up on the PlayStation controller, like the wind god will send gusts of wind in roughly the right direction, right? It's not telling you exactly where to go. It's just kind of giving you a vague direction, and then you need to study the land. You need to go up to a high mountain and look to see if you can see any villages in the distance. You need to see if you can find any paths with signs that will point you in the right direction. Right, you need to become a lot more one with the environment. Another good example is Elden Ring, which I don't think even barely has a compass. Like you can set a waypoint if you want to, but like you're in that game and you just got to kind of figure it out. And so you need to study the environment, study the land and the colors and what the developers are doing to try and catch your eye on a distant landmark. And so everyone's just getting way better at this right now, and I couldn't be happier for AAA. I still think that space is pretty I don't know, it's in the doldrums right now. It's very not super creatively inspiring right now, but I think there's some good movement I'm seeing. Snipe?
It's a different mechanic rather than waypoints. I think something, anytime that you have the player in like a pressure chamber, like that room that they're stuck in, that hallway they're stuck in, the elevator that they get stuck in, we kind of try to build a compression, and then we like to release with a large open area. Like that rooftop, for example, it's even the music lets you know that it's a bit of a rest. Like,
relax.
In Zelda Ocarina of Time, it was the ferry stations where you get a gift from there. So very similarly, you get the gift of the taser, you get these power-ups, but then it's also a little bit of a breath and a little bit of a look around, like climbing to the top of a hilltop.
Yeah.
So the more that we do these pressures and releases, I would visually see on our players' faces while we'd watch them play our game that relaxation too. And so they're sitting down to play a game. You do want to make them feel relaxed, but if you just say, okay, relax, no one's going to relax. So you got to build a little bit of pressure, and then you can get them to relax. And then they're saying, oh, I'm having fun now. Like they agree to having fun. So and that's really important.
That's clever. That's really clever. Did you have any challenges dealing with the fixed camera versus, let's say, like a standard third-person camera?
Yes.
So
yes. So
just on that, it's I like the fixed camera like the most now. I was a little hesitant when Austin was explaining it and how it was going to work, but then as you really think about it, as an artist and a designer that we both are, you know exactly what the player is looking at all times. Now we do have the option to have a chase camera. We discourage players to do that because like it allows us to have this. Yeah. Like this is a composition of a scene. It's mise en scène, right? So
yeah. So yes, we literally made a third-person camera behind Amy's back, and I don't think it's actually available. We took it out because a lot of people by just default would switch. It's in the game. Look sensitivity. I don't think it's in the game anymore. Camera. If I put the cheat mode on, do I get the camera? Does anyone see it? No, I don't think so. No. So like, the problem was this, right? Like a third-person camera gives a lot of capability to the player and gives them a lot of freedom. But we as developers lose a massive amount of control over what the player can see at any given time. If you went to the classic Resident Evil games and gave them a standard stock third-person behind this back camera, you could make it work, but those particular levels and structures would not work anymore. You need to kind of alter how you do things. Here, we can set up and put all of our resources into really nice shots like this. And we don't have to worry about like, what does it look like if Amy's looking in the exact opposite direction? Now in the game, you can do that. You can hold right click to look around any place you want, but this is not a very beautiful camera shot, right? So we don't actually want players doing this a lot. Right. This looks a whole lot better. And for being so logistically strapped as we are and resource strapped, like we really have to put all of our effort into those few shots, right? Anyway, it's very hard for players to get used to this, which is why when you boot up the game the first time, we actually ask you if you have experience with tank controls and fixed camera. And if you don't have any experience, we will dramatically slow down Amy's movement, her rotation, which makes it much easier to deal with. Also, the reason we added Sheepley's Cave at the beginning of the game, which didn't used to be there, was so that players could get a lot of experience just kind of walking around before they were getting chased a ton.
That makes total sense. When it comes to the marketing of this game, and Anthony asked this question as well, what type of marketing are you doing? What seems to be gaining the most traction versus not getting the most traction? What what social media platforms, things like that? What do you think is the best so far, and what's the least productive?
I've got a video to show you. Go ahead, Snipe.
I was gonna say, so it's actually a couple fold because one of my key aspects on this is being a producer as well and kind of connecting and doing some of the marketing. We did connect with a publisher, which has been very helpful as far as some of the other bits.
Sorry.
No worries. As far as some of the larger bits that I don't necessarily have access to certain rings of people. But really it's some grassroots. We are going to conventions. I've signed up for the Indiecade in Detroit. I don't think I pronounced that right. And so we are trying to, a lot of grassroots where it's, brushing shoulders with people, not just everyone, but people who play games. So we went to Replay Cafe over in Detroit. It's a cafe that has a whole like bastion of computers. It's amazing. And players that play games come into that establishment. So they've already kind of said, yes, I want to play something. So then we had a chance to demo our game to them. And, initially you're like, I don't know if I want to play your game. Is it any good? And then once they start seeing it, they're like, oh, this is actually fun. And so then they'll actually invest some time into it. And then that's when we were able to sell like, physical copies.
Mhm.
There was a little downfall because with our publisher agreement, I'm only allowed to sell these shoulder to shoulder. I can't like digitally sell these. But that's okay too, because our publisher's helping us out with Steam.
Yeah.
We're planning on we're on the Nintendo Switch. And I'm missing
The Switch
another
port is
platform.
hard, by the way. We can talk more about that later.
Oh. Go
Did
ahead.
that kind of answer the question, I guess?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Austin had another one.
A very quick recap, right? Like getting our game out to the local events where a lot of people show up is very, very impactful. If we put our game out onto itch, right on Steam, there is a sea of games. I think the day we put our demo out on Steam, we had about 200 other competing indie games by like 1:30 p.m. And so you can get swallowed up even if you have a pretty good product, unless your game has a certain viral magic to it, or you happen to get an influencer to pick it up. You can very well get buried. And to an extent, we did get buried. One thing you can do is you can try and get on the consoles. You can try and get into Steam. You can get into more exclusive markets. You can go to your local events and be, one of 5 indie games there instead of one of 300. And that is how you can kind of get yourself a much nicer market. Our publishers have a lot of contacts with influencers in the genre. And so we're going to rely on them to help us get more interviews like this, to talk to people, to get people interested in the game, and to hopefully get some Let's Plays going on.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, you kind of brought it up. The struggles of game development, what are the landmines that
Brutal.
you guys walked into that you're like, guys, don't ever do this again. Don't do what we did, because we had to learn it the hard way.
I guess for me on my end, having a clear product as early as possible. I always rely on that MVP. Getting that minimum viable product done as soon as possible meant I could, still have Austin interested in working with me on this. I mean, Austin's a fantastic engineer. Being able to work with him on this product means we could actually accomplish it. I don't think I could have produced a product like this on my own. And I really don't think anyone can make something solely on their own, not without spending 6 years on it. If we just multiply the 2 years that we spent, really I would rather just focus on the first 6 months of this game. We had so much done in the first 6 months, it would easily been 2 years for somebody individually. So teaming up with somebody, but then once you do that, don't be like, oh, I got this team now, I'm going to make this huge thing. Get a really narrow like slice of that pie done and get it as done as possible. And then that really helped, because then when conflicts did show up about, either time constraints or just the quality wasn't there a couple of times on my end, it was really great that it was an earlier gate in that. The quality wasn't there. So then I had a chance to go back and make the quality better. Yeah. And that's, I think, you're not going to do it perfect the first time. Never expect that. So get those passes done early and quickly.
Yes. I'll say that on my end as well, like finding someone awesome like Kyle to team up with and be able to handle the art. If I'm handling the art in this game, we're finished. We're completely screwed. So you want to get out there, you want to go to events in your local area or remote events. Try and find people who complement your skills well and have a lot of passion and energy and maybe some time and maybe some funding to pitch in. That last one is not as important though. And make that team, right? Get on a team, you can make something much more impactful than anyone. But as Kyle was saying, the most important takeaway by an absolute mile is you want to quickly get iterating fast. You want to quickly have something that's playable, not a year in. How about a week in? Try and get something that's playable, even if it doesn't look good, right? People will know that, right? They won't give you a hard time.
I think it was Christmas Day. I think is when because it happened to fall on a Saturday, which is when we were doing our meeting. You gave it to me that evening. I think in 3 days I had that world that you see there. And I used assets that are readily available. You've seen some of these assets in other games, but to me that wasn't important. The important part was the story that we were building, and a lot of it was placeholder art. Some of it we kept in there because it's good enough. Like this building we're on is part of one of the modular building packs, but we've augmented it and now we've added the pool, like the pool functionality, the floor functionality, that wasn't in that. So we actually just took what that skeleton was and enhanced it to work for what we needed. And honestly, I don't think that many people care that they've seen that house before. They've never seen this story before.
Right.
Yeah. Or the context. Also a quick warning, like like no puzzle you ever make will be correct the first time or be usable by most players. Like no matter how much experience you have designing puzzles or guiding a player through a space, when you have them play test the game, when you watch people actually engage with your game, like they will do the craziest things that you never predicted, right? They'll do things in a weird order that you've never tested and it will break the game. They will get distracted and focus on the weirdest thing that has nothing to do with the puzzle, right? Like they'll create their own theories. They'll get themselves confused. And the only way that you can never get this 100% consistent, but the only way you can get to like a nice 80% success rate for your players is to just watch and grind and just watch tons of players play your game and just make tiny tweaks until they seem to be hitting that 75 to 80% success rate that you want. Okay. Like, so don't fool yourself into thinking you don't have to play test. I don't care who you are, you do.
If you can, if you're able to, I know Discord really helps with this. Being able to watch your player play, like as creepy as it sounds, like you want to see where their eyes are looking. You want to know where they're looking, because if they're not looking at your answer that you're hoping they're going to see, it means as a designer, you didn't put enough breadcrumbs to get there. That's huge.
Gotcha. And Charles asked about your MVP.
Yes.
And when it comes to game jams, would you consider that is like an essential thing in doing an MVP is just getting good at game jams and just trying to run through it as quickly as possible?
It's not essential, but it's extremely beneficial for multiple reasons. Number one, you'll meet other people and you'll kind of get a feel for who's really good at stuff. Right? Like who can very quickly create models that I like, okay? Who has a deep passion for survival horror genre, and they understand why, not only have they played the old games, but they also understand why they work. You also will quickly gain skills that you didn't have before. Often game jams are a really good way to they're a really good excuse to jump into a bunch of technologies that you've just never had a reason to use. And you might discover that some of those new things you've learned can be fed back into your existing projects. Yeah, you can also quickly try out game designs. Game designs are a very hard thing to pin down. You can write something up in paper or in a game design document that you swear it's going to work, and then it doesn't. Likewise, sometimes really weird game design documents do end up working. Another topic, a quick note on game design documents. Kyle likes them a lot. I only sort of like them. There's this very common phrase that goes, right, no plan survives contact with the enemy, but failing to plan is planning to fail. So you should create a plan, and you should kind of spend some time thinking about your resources and your direction, but you should never stick to that plan when you discover a better route to do things, or you discover the plan is a bit out of date, or your assumptions were wrong. You should start to explore. This is a creative process. And the only way to really manage a creative process, in my opinion, is to have lots of playtesting and a very tight and feedback-driven iteration loop.
Gotcha. Man, this was absolutely fantastic. We're nearing the end of the hour. So if you guys have any last bits of advice or topics you'd like to say, we'd love to hear it.
Well, I just want to take a moment to thank our other artists that worked with us on this. I know Lourdes and Nastia did a fantastic job. Nastia was our 2D artist who created these really, really engaging images that helped both Austin and I really understand the story that we're trying to tell. And then the 3D modeling from Lourdes was just fantastic to make it so realistic with our Poseidon character. Amy and Kurt, just really amazing. So big thanks to them. And then thank you, Al, for taking time out of your day to set this all up.
Yeah, I have a couple quick things to give you. This one right here, if you click on this spreadsheet, is a big, I think you have access to it, don't you? Yeah, here everyone comes. It's a big checklist of all of the indie publishers that we have found with their contact details. And some notes often on what kind of games they do. You can go through this checklist and I recommend, if you're trying to contact a publisher, get your game published, you create an email template, and then you just go down the list, right? You customize your email a tiny bit for each party you reach out to, but the chances of landing a publisher can be very small. So how do you deal with low odds? Well, you increase N, you increase the number of attempts you make. And so if you are looking to get any of your student games published or any of your games published, these publishers, often they aren't receiving as much communication as you think they are,
Hmm.
especially the smaller ones that are a bit more obscure, right? Even though the publishers you've never heard of, like maybe Retalika, right? Hey, they have their own big fan base, and they have console dev kits, which you might need. So even they can help you out, and maybe they're not getting nearly as much competition as something like a tiny build. Okay. The last thing I want to say is if you ever want to ask follow-up questions, or if you want any advice on our journey, I'm going to give you the link to our Discord, and you can find me in there. You can ask any questions or DM me in there anytime you want. Okay. Both Snipe and I are in there, and our publisher is as well. So you can probably ask them questions too. Pineapple works if you want to. So the link is right here. Okay.
Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. Again, thank you for everybody for checking in on this. And we're going to stay online for a little bit longer to answer some of the rest of these questions. And everyone else, thank you for being a part of this.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.